Welcome to Speculative Sandbox, your audio playground for creative storytellers. My name is Vickie Lan, and in each episode, I and a guest will unpack a trope with an eye for world building, character development, or narrative structures. You can also join the conversation on TikTok and Instagram. For those times when the real world just doesn't cut it, let's get lost in a fictional one. All right, Megan, what would you consider to be your destiny in life?
Ooh, I love how deep of a question that is.
Right, I'll straight out the gate.
My destiny is to align myself with my higher purpose, which I believe is to raise the spiritual intelligence of the universe for us to evolve on our path as spiritual beings for the greater good.
Okay, I love that. Do you feel like you're doing a good job on your
I
path to
am
your
definitely
destiny?
trying.
That's what matters, right?
Yes.
All right, Megan, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and share some of your latest projects?
Yeah, so my name is Megan Mary, and I'm a metaphysical author as well as dream analyst. I'm also an intuitive and a mystic, as you can tell. And I also host a podcast called Women's Dream Enlightenment. And on that podcast, we share dreams, deep discussions, and stories of women's spiritual awakening.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Here I am now trying to think of a dream. And I had a dream recently, but now I'm forgetting it. I hate that when the further away you get from a dream, it just
Oh,
kind of
yes.
fades away. So, all
Yes.
right. What is the most
So,
interesting dream you've had to interpret?
oh, so many. Um, so many interesting ones, but what I find most interesting is some of the similarities and some of the differences. So there's been a number of ones that I have analyzed on my podcast. And even though I review the dream beforehand, the dreamer isn't there. So when we get on to record, it's very unpredictable in terms of what's going to happen. And the very first time I did that, it was a nightmare, literally and figuratively. It was a nightmare session, and the power went out.
Oh, wow.
So I had a huge thunderstorm roll in right when I was about to do it, knocked out the power. She's sitting on Zoom. I was so nervous I had to get back on. We picked it back up where we left off, like about a half hour later. She was still waiting
Oh,
and finished the session. So you can go listen to that. It was with Lori Appleby. She's another transformational life coach. So that was pretty memorable.
it sounds like it. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. Um, I'm trying to think of like crazy dreams, and of course I can't right off the top of my head, but I used to have, oh, all right. When I was little, I used to dream that a banana peel was chasing me around the house. Does that give you any
Okay.
interesting clues about me?
Hmm.
Like spider style. Like just the peel.
Okay.
Yeah, that thing
Well,
terrified me. It was a recurring nightmare.
the most important thing in the way that I do dream analysis is what that holds symbolism for you. So say hypothetically you're allergic to bananas.
Okay.
Then that's going to be completely different from, well, my mother would always send me a banana when I went to school. So that was the one thing I look forward to having in my lunchbox. That would mean like security, right? If you're allergic to it, that would be like an aversion. It really depends on what a banana to you,
Okay.
what that meaning holds. And then, of
Interesting.
course, there's the action of you running away, being
Hmm.
scared, it being a nightmare, the emotional response, possibly if there are other people there, all of those things.
Interesting. Well, the fact too that it was just the peel and not the whole banana, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like holds some clues.
For sure. Yes, it's like that skin, right? It's
Yeah.
like the outer layer, maybe that you don't need. It's
Mm.
protective, but
Oh.
you have to shed it at some point.
Or maybe I ate the banana and the peel is like, what the heck? And wants it back. Maybe I feel like I took something that I shouldn't
Yeah.
have.
So many layers.
All right. Well, I'm so excited to have you join me today because we're going to talk about fated destiny. And I would love to hear from you. First of all, what interested you in this topic and what does it mean as applied to fiction?
Yes. So really my debut novel has to do with this. It has to do with Fated Destiny, the Dream Haunters. And it's in fiction, it's really a trope that tells us a story about a main character discovering their ultimate destiny or their purpose or their powers or their place in the world. And I mean, really, as a narrative device, it can be a mystery builder because the reader discovers it along with the character.
Hmm.
And usually this can involve some kind of prophecy or it could be a birthright situation because it's usually magically oriented, supernatural can be, or there's some kind of cosmic purpose that has to be fulfilled.
Ooh. Let's go over some examples. The ones of okay, here's a couple that I came up with. Harry Potter, destined by prophecy. Neo and the Matrix, also destined by prophecy. Paul, a I can never Atreides. Paul Atreides in Dune. He was also prophesied. Sansa Stark was fated by circumstance because of her birth. So fated by birthright. Daenerys Targaryen fated by birthright. So what are some examples you could think of?
Yeah, so I had the Harry Potter one in all of the questions. So yes, because that's like one of my biggest references. But also Lord of the Rings was one that you didn't mention.
Mhm.
So there is a prophecy that there's going to be one ring to rule them all. And, you know, the fate of Middle Earth relies on Frodo Baggins going to this great distance and he has to summon great courage to fulfill his fated destiny.
Yep. Yeah. Are there any other ways that someone can be fated to something outside of prophecy? I mentioned birthright in some, but can you think of
Mhm.
any other examples?
There can be like accidental
Hmm.
too. So where they kind of fall into it, they accidentally discover it. And that's kind of like the TV show Charmed, that they discover that accidentally. It is maybe birthright. I mean, it is birthright, but it's not prophesied, I don't
Hmm.
think.
Or like stumbling upon something and with it comes great responsibility, right? The whole great power means great
Yes.
responsibility. Yeah.
Yes.
What is this fate? What is the fated destiny trope trying to accomplish in fiction?
I think that the point of it is really to lead you through this self-discovery journey. And it's an opportunity for the readers to discover the purpose as the character embodies it. And the themes of self-discovery are really key to the work that I do, both in dreams and in my writing, because it's really follows my main character in her self-discovery journey. And the goal is for it to not only be educational, but inspirational at the same time, so that the reader resonates with that journey and discovers that they too can walk that path of their own.
Hmm. Yeah, the fated destiny as a form of motivation is a pretty powerful one and a popular one, especially in like, I mean, in general fiction and fantasies, of course, but I feel like I see it a lot in middle grade, right? When you read children's books. I mean, Harry Potter being a great example, but then you also have the Percy Jackson ones, where you have Percy, the main character, is fated to a certain degree because of his birthright. But then, of course, there's the literal act of prophecies by the oracle that's so prevalent in Greek mythology. So I think it's a lot of fun. So what do you love about this from both a writer and a reading perspective?
I love that it gives me an opportunity to teach the work that I do, so that really the transformational benefits of dream work, I get to use the fated destiny trope to achieve that end.
Ooh, so dreams can reveal fate, your destiny, kind of thing.
Yes,
Ooh, tell me more.
yes. So dreams are really, to me, the doorway to our higher self. And they're a way we can tap into not just our intuition, but higher realms of consciousness where there is a universal field of knowledge. And we come into this world with a purpose each time we do, if you believe we do that more than once. But all of that knowledge, like the Akashic records, all of the knowledge of the universe is held in that field, in the quantum field. And so if we can access that knowledge, we can understand greater the world, the illusion it might be, and our place in it.
Okay. Interesting. So do you think there's a predestiny for everybody?
I think that each time, because I believe in reincarnation, so I believe that each time we reincarnate, that there is a purpose, a lesson, an accomplishment you're supposed to do, something. So either you're overcoming things that you didn't get right in the past, or you're raising up to a higher level of things that you're here to do. And that once you've achieved those things, that then you don't come back, that you move on to a higher realm of, I don't know, advisory council, ascended masters, all those sorts of things.
So the idea that the actions that you do now in this lifetime will affect where you're born into the next lifetime?
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
So how does, and I'm just curious, how do the laws of the universe measure? Is it like an energy? Like, okay, when you do acts of positivity, does it like have a higher vibration or something like
it
that that
does.
informs? Okay. Tell me
It
more about
does.
that.
Yes, because everything is energy. And unless we're thinking about quantum physics, we don't really think about this very much. But light and color and sound and our emotions, energy and motion, it's all energy. We're all energy. And matter is just almost an illusion. It's an
Okay.
illusion of physicality. And if we can understand that we're spirits first and humans second, and that our existence here is just a reflection of our perceptions, then we can separate ourselves a bit from the pressures of this world and understand like the greater scope of
Mhm.
our, I'd say existence, but it's more than that.
Okay. In our initial emails, mentioning the topics that you wanted to cover, you also talked about chosen by destiny or the chosen one trope. So how does this kind of come into play as you're writing those kind of tropes relating to destiny and energy and all that stuff?
So in my story, Hannah Sky has a recurring dream, and it's really what leads her to seek. I mean, she's already a seeker, but it's what leads her down that path. And when she starts to follow that, and she starts to follow the synchronicities, and she starts to notice the unique things that are happening in the environment that she travels to, she finds out about her own calling. Now, it is birthright, but it's also chosen one because she has a certain ability that is, you know, her legacy, really, that she has to embrace, and she has to put herself aside to do that.
Okay. So in these stories where characters have that predetermined fate, how does this impact their sense of agency, their individuality?
So many times there is a sense of inevitability that even if the characters resist, they still ultimately have to confront their destiny. However monumental the task might seem, there's always a greater reward at the end, though. So it sets up the tension between free will and fate because there's always this resistance and there's always these challenges, and then there's the catharsis at the end, in the character accepting their fate, but which in and of itself can become a form of agency rather than a surrender, really.
Okay.
Um, and there because there's empowerment in accepting that, in owning that fate for yourself, embracing it rather than rejecting it.
Gotcha. It would be really interesting to see an inversion of this trope where somebody finds out you have to save the people or blah blah blah, and you resent being told that so much that you go out of your way to do everything but. And what I find, I'm like, is that even possible if you are on the receiving end of a chosen one or fated destiny? Um, can you outrun your destiny? Can you turn it around? What do you think?
I guess if you really believe in fated destiny, no, you can't. But that's kind of the anti-hero path, I think, where it's natural to have some initial rejection, some initial surprise, confusion. We see that all the time. Even like I'm thinking of like Spider-Man or something where it's kind of like, what's happening? And I don't want to do this, and I don't know what I'm getting myself into. But um, I think at some point though it doesn't serve the I don't know, for me it doesn't serve the story well if they continually reject it. When Frodo was far from home, he was curious about the outside world, but he also loved his routines. He loved the safety and security of the Shire, and I actually love the Shire. I wish that they had more time in the
Mm,
Shire. But and similarly in my book, Hannah is so filled with self-doubt. She spent her whole life hiding her true self. She feels like she's trapped on this hamster wheel of negative thoughts and
hmm
about her worth. And she has to get rid of all that. She has to have the death of the ego to defeat the bad guys
hmm
and to ultimately fulfill her fated destiny. That's really what she's called to do. And so if she doesn't do that, she doesn't grow.
mm.
And so
Yeah,
that propels the characters to rise to the occasion, to change the future by changing themselves.
yeah. Because then in that case, it's a protagonist who chooses to take on the stakes and responsibilities of said fated destiny, which then makes for a good story, an interesting story. There is
Right.
a Greek myth that okay, so let's say your fated destiny is to die a miserable death, right? And you're like, "Ugh, I definitely don't want to do that. I don't see any heroics in that." So
Yeah.
in this case, it was a king, and now I'm going off of college mythology class, so I'm trying to remember. A king was told that he is destined to be killed by his own son, so he tried to get rid of his son. And I think this actually happened with Uranus and Zeus too. But in this case, it's an actual king, and he sends his son away, or he wants to have his son murdered. And instead, the son is hidden away. The son does not know his connections to his father, and he ends up, I think, throwing a rock or throwing a frisbee. I don't remember, and it lands and hits the king's toe, and the king ends up, when you get injuries back in the day and it turns into infections, got
Yeah.
killed that way. And it happened.
Okay.
He couldn't outrun it, you know what I mean? And in
Yes.
that case, it became like almost like a warning story instead. Like you can't outrun your destiny.
Right. I think that in those situations, yeah, I mean that we see that again and again in mythology, but and in my story, there's really an embracing of it. But
Mm,
yeah, I was thinking as you were talking about Macbeth and how that's what he does. He says, "Well, I have to murder the king because I'm prophesied to become the king, and so I have to do this." And he convinces himself that what he's doing is an act of destiny. But you know, that's kind of it's kind of like, where are you taking advantage too? And that's
mm,
also the case with fated destiny all the time, where people they might embrace it and say, "Oh, well, I have this magic power. Now I'm going to go win the lottery. Now I'm going to get back
mm,
at all my enemies. And now I'm going to do bad things with it." Right? There's always that moral story about whether you're going to wield it for good or bad
hmm
too.
Or the idea too, if the fated destiny is kind of attached to a choice. So if you do this, this will happen. And you're not told exactly what, okay, if the king, you will be the next king. You are fated to become the next king. The king will die. And you're like, okay, I'm just going to hurry this along and I'm going to kill him off myself. But maybe that didn't fit the parameters or the expectations of the fated destiny. And so you thought you were taking something into your own hands. I guess my question is a fated destiny absolute, or can it be like taken away from you? Sorry, I asked some big
Well,
questions.
yeah, what I think is interesting about that is timeline trajectories and parallel realities. So in the quantum field, all possibilities exist.
Okay.
Everything at once at the same time. The future, the past, and the present, because there is no linear time in the quantum field. And so this explains prophecies, this explains time travel, this explains all of those things. And it also means that there are the branch theory, that there's multiple versions at any said time. So yes, I think it's entirely possible that, Macbeth could say, well, I'm fated to become king, so I'm gonna kill the king. And that wasn't what he was supposed to do. And then by killing the king, he ends up on this other branch
Hmm.
of reality, where it's different from that. I do think it's possible that multiple trajectories exist. And so possibly you could avoid your fate
Hmm.
by skipping to the next timeline.
Okay. Here's a bit of a related question, especially when it involves choices we make. Does the idea of destiny justify the actions a character might take in their journey? Could this justify morally gray or even questionable decisions? I mean, the
And that's,
fates told me to
yeah,
do it. Therefore I'm okay, right?
yeah. And that goes along with the Macbeth theory, really. It also comes to be where does it cross the line between a curse and a gift? And it's it explores that moral ambiguity of good versus evil, right versus wrong. How can we make the character's journey more complex to explore that? And it's not always I mean, you're not supposed to know, right? What happens? That's what builds the intrigue.
All right. The Chosen One by Destiny, or just the Chosen One trope, is pretty popular. What are some ways we can subvert this trope?
One way is to state in fact that it's not like the chosen one. It's not just that one person. So that everybody has this ability. And
Ooh,
you see
everyone's
this
chosen.
and you
Okay.
see this sometimes. It's just that no one else is accepting it.
Oh.
So in the Dream Haunters, it's not just Hannah's responsibility to pay attention to dreams. Everyone should. And so those that don't are called the dream deniers. The ones that think that dreams don't mean anything and they have no purpose, they have no call to action, they're ignoring them. And by doing that, they're leaving themselves open to the attacks by the dream haunters.
Ooh.
So by making, failure, and then there's also failure. Like failure could be a possibility. I mean, even if you're predetermined, doesn't mean you're going to get it right the first time. And so that
Mm-hmm.
raises the stakes. It emphasizes that the character has to actually raise to a certain level to achieve it, which they may or may not do, or what's going to happen if they don't along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing is, all of the books in my series take place at Mercury retrograde.
Okay.
And the purpose of that is to weave in the celestial influence. And in this case, Mercury retrograde serves as a catalyst that alters the laws of the magic. And so
Ooh.
it can make unpredictable things happen. It can make magic not work. Can make it can give negative forces more power. So that is kind of one of those, oh, but we have a special circumstance here.
Mm. Okay. Well, speaking of magic, you also mentioned discovered magic as an offset of the fated destiny trope. So, how do we typically see this in fiction? And what makes this moment of discovery so pivotal to the story?
So I mentioned this before, and it's relevant to this question as well. Fictional discoveries of magic in a time of crisis. So that's what happens in like the opening scene of Charmed, where Piper freezes the kitchen when she's
Okay.
working as a chef because her she doesn't want her boss to taste the food yet because she forgot the important ingredient. Um, it can happen because of that, like in a moment of emotional like panic. But it can also happen, when they're very young, the character's very young, when they're about to, or right when they're about to embark on their journey. So when Hannah arrives in Maple Hollow, which is the setting for all three of my books, she has this physical but also this ethereal experience once she sets her feet on the island because she has to get there by ferry. And when she arrives, it kind of crosses that threshold, and it's that threshold moment. She realizes that she's in a magical place. It's a
Hmm.
different world with different rules. And so that is really important because the character recognizes that they're about to embark on something really significant. And when they do discover their magic, um, again, they're kind of faced with that truth about themselves, and they have to decide whether they're going to deny that or whether they're going to accept that. But either way, they know they're never going to be the same again.
Hmm.
And so, like you said, with great power comes great responsibility.
So when it comes to discovered magic in a trope, it's a tool basically to present like a new obstacle or a new factor that then leads to the character making a choice. Did I get that right?
Yes,
Okay. So it's like almost like an inciting incident or some kind of surprise twist or something like that that further informs like the plot progression. Okay. Um,
essentially.
okay. Does the sudden discovery of magic influence a character's sense of morality? Because when you have magic, you are now elevated, right? You're above me. I don't have magic. If someone has magic, dang, you're like a whole other kind of like the mutant debate, right? Like the people are scared of mutants because they're more powerful. So how can these characters navigate ethical dilemmas that come with newfound power, especially when it could take them in a good or bad path?
So, discovering you have magic powers can definitely create a moral dilemma. Sometimes you want to use it, like I said, like to win the lottery. You try and do something selfish for yourself. But there almost always is that mantra that comes in and says, well, it's not gonna work if you do it for yourself. Or look at all the consequences that are gonna happen if you misuse it. And so even though they're obviously everybody's initially tempted to misuse the power, they usually find out that they to be granted this power is also to be granted the responsibility of it, and that you have to kind of wrestle with your ego, put your personal desires aside for the greater good, or there's going to be a consequence. And even in Lord of the Rings, both Frodo and Gandalf realize that the ring, although immensely powerful, can also be corruptive. So at
Mm,
different times, we see even them being overtaken by the desire for it and wanting it all for themselves, and
mm.
just that they almost can't contain its power.
Yeah. It's code for like resources. Magic is a form of money, it's a form of shelter, it's a form of food. It's just like a just different because then when you are tempted with that increase of resources, what are you willing to do for more money, for more food, for more shelter? You know what I mean? In this case, it's being
Mm-hmm.
magic to have that
Mm-hmm.
advantage. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so in different stories have different magic systems. Um, and so when we're talking about like suddenly discovering that you have magic and related to being the chosen one or fated destiny, how can writers think about this from a almost a social impact, right? So let's say one world, magic is well known, right? Magical realism, everyone knows about magic. So when you discover you have magic, it might be about you going, oh, finally, I belong. I was worried that I was different and now I belong. Versus you are in today's world and suddenly you discover you can have magic and now it's the exact opposite. You're like, what the heck is wrong with me? And they're going to come find me. So yeah, how do different magical systems affect the experience of discovering that magic?
Yes. So there's all different kinds of magical systems. Some are a lot more complex and detailed in
Hmm.
fiction than others. And I find that that also differentiates between like high and low fantasy too, because it depends on, like you said, if it's magical realism, if it's a world that exists and then magic is within it, or if it's a whole other world that does not quote unquote exist and that has its own like complete, cities and planets and whatever,
Hmm.
much more complex. So I think that the magical system dictates how the character discovers their powers, their journey in learning to control them, and the consequences of using them. But we don't always necessarily know everything. We don't know how Gandalf has his power. We just know that he does. And in the Witches of Maple Hollow series, it's more on the soft magic system side. There are not clearly defined boundaries to the magic, and their presence is the presence of the magic is mysterious in nature. It follows more the path of an awakening of latent powers rather than the slow learned development where you're tutoring
Hmm.
essentially. I mean,
You're in
Harry
school
Potter
for
is
7 years
still,
and then you're a
yeah,
wizard.
he's still destined, but he does go to wizarding school, right? And he
Hmm.
has to learn and make all his mistakes along the way and um get up in the ranks of, experience. And in this case, it's more of a, I use the term spiritual awakening a lot, but when I experienced it myself, it was a spiritual remembering of sorts because it wasn't like, oh, now I know this. It was more, oh, now I remember.
The magic was in you all along, kind of
Yes.
thing. Okay. That's cool. I love that. So then, my next question, I feel like you might have already found or discovered, which is what magic powers would you hope to discover in your life?
Yes. Well, I, as a child, had amazing flying dreams. So I would love to be able to fly. I was so convinced when I was little that I could fly that I remember spending hours trying to jump off the picnic bench in my backyard, thinking that if I could just get the right amount of oomph jumping off, that I would just catapult into the sky. And of course, it never happened. But because I was dreaming at night of flying, I thought, working. And in this reality, like, what is this 3D world? So, but many of the quote unquote powers that I hope to attain, I actually feel that on a mystical level, they are possible. So I would like to harness telekinesis or to be able to heal others or to time travel. I think all those things on certain levels of reality are possible.
I
Of
love
course,
that.
I also want to be able to spontaneously clean my house without lifting a finger, but
Oh man,
still
if we
haven't
all
mastered
had
that one.
Mrs. Weasley's, magic wand and cook
Yes.
for her, I would love that. I was the same. I also I fantasized about flying. Mine was more about like I hated transportation, and I was like, if I could just fly there, I'll get there faster, and I don't have to worry about walking to school or all those things. And it just to me, a sense of freedom was a big deal. But my dreams were always ruined by my logic because I'd want to fly and then my brain would go, but Vicky, you can't fly. And then boom, I was flying in my dream and then suddenly I can't fly anymore. I just cut it right off. And
Oh,
I resented that so much because like, Vicky, just let yourself fly in dreams, damn it. It's like, but I could never do it. So I hold myself back, clearly.
yes. And you can change that. You could
Oh,
change
okay.
that.
Do you have
Yeah.
advice for me so I can
Yes,
start practicing?
I do. So the process of dream incubation and dream manifestation is where you either re-enter a dream that you've had and through a guided visualization, imagine an alternative scenario, or you write down in your dream journal before you go to bed a dream that you would like to have. And either way, it's like the create your own ending of dreams. You're saying what you want to happen so that your mind understands the proposed dream scenario.
Okay.
And this is also how you can induce lucid dreaming. It's one of the ways, is by learning to understand that you do have influence on the content of your dreams. And particularly in lucid dreaming, if you can attain the state of lucidity, you can then say, well, I don't want to be here in this, mall. I want to be flying over Ireland. And you will be. So you have to believe in your ability to do that, which is exactly translated to believing in this world that you can do what you
Hmm.
believe.
Okay. So before I go to bed tonight, I need to go, Vicky, you're gonna fly. You're gonna fly. So fly, all right? And then I go to
Yeah,
bed.
and you might want to make a practice of it. You might want to try that for a week every night so
Okay.
that you are putting your intention towards it, because where your attention goes is where your energy flows.
I need to put the same amount of intention into it as when I'm worried about a work project. And the night before said work project goes off, I'm dreaming about it that whole night and I don't get any rest. Same idea,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Without the stress.
So I have practice. I know how to do this. It's just under extreme anxiety
Yep.
and I just need to rechannel that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Megan, did we miss anything? Or is there anything else you'd like to share about the Fated Destiny trope, the Chosen, discovered magic, all that stuff?
I want to take a quick moment to talk about the difference between the spelling of magic with a C and ending with a K,
Ooh, okay, tell me.
because my subtitle of both of my books, and probably the third in the series, is A Metaphysical Mystery of Magic, but magic with a K.
Okay.
So, magic with a C can simply refer to stage illusions, sleight of hand entertainment, rabbit out of the hat stuff.
Right.
It can also mean supernatural fictional powers, and usually does, but essentially manipulating the physical world through metaphysical means. But magic with a K refers to a more spiritual practice. It could be ceremonial or really anything that moves a person towards fulfilling their destiny. And so it's the way that we harness energies, what we've been talking about, to change ourselves and the world around us. And so my fictional stories are magical realism, because not only do they happen in the real life, but they also teach us about metaphysical topics and spiritual awakenings or rememberings that can and do happen in real life.
Hmm.
And the magic with a K is embracing our true calling and the purpose, our purpose, through our dreams. And that is actually very real.
Ooh. Well, thank you for teaching me about that. Should I make sure that when I write magic in the show notes, it's with a K? Because that is the
Yes.
context. Because we're not talking about rabbits here. We're not talking about
Right. No.
magicians on a stage.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. All right. How can our listeners find you if they want to learn more?
Yes. So let's see. My website is meganmary.com. And my debut novel, The Dream Haunters, A Metaphysical Mystery of Magic, is book one of the Witches of Maple Hollow series. And that is available now worldwide at all retailers. And it's also an audiobook, which is super fabulous. I'm really excited about that. And book two, The Dream Mirrors, is coming out in May. And then the book three next Halloween. So all of
Ooh.
those are coming real quick. And on my website, you can purchase signed copies. I have merchandise, cozy pillows and candles and blankets and dream journals
Ooh.
to go with the book. And you also find my podcast on there, which comes out every other Wednesday. And I also have self-paced courses on there that teach you the method that I use for analyzing dreams, and so that you can start decoding your own dreams.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me today. Listeners, thanks for tuning in this week. I'll be back with another episode next week, and you guys all have a great day. Bye.